Hello, welcome back to Dad Chats 2, and today I'm talking to Martin Scivier. Martin and I have met once before. We met at Talking About Diabetes, TAD, in London.
That's right.
About a month ago, I think it was, Martin.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, I'm okay. Still surviving.
Getting by, yeah. I think we had a good chat actually, didn't we, in the pub after TAD, and I think one or two of us were kind of amazed at how well you're doing, your longevity with diabetes, because you've had type 1 for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, I was diagnosed in September 1954. I was 5 years old. So I'm coming up now to in September I'll be 68 years, which is a bit of time. And I've seen a few changes over those years, and I've always kept myself to myself, really, about diabetes. I never went to any of the diabetic camps when I was a child. And to be honest, the area that I lived in, I didn't really know anybody that had type 1 diabetes. And even when you go to the hospital, you tend to sit there with your eyes, your eyes looking down and, reading a book, or nowadays looking on the phone, and nobody really talks, so you don't actually meet anybody. And recently I've started to go more on Twitter and Facebook, and just getting more involved, with the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you are quite new to Twitter, as you say. Was there a point that sort of inspired you to engage a bit more with it in terms of community or Twitter, or did you just stumble upon it?
Well, I stumbled upon it, I suppose, and started following people like yourself, and the information that you gave. When I started pumping in 2016, it was social media that I turned to, that I got a lot of my information from. And over time, I started to get more involved. But it was only really when I started looping in 2020, and I gathered all the information from the social media about what pump to get and what apps and that sort of thing. So then I thought, well, it's good to try and give back the information. So on Facebook, I'm on loads of different groups to do with diabetes and pumping. And I just decided, if somebody needed an answer and I had it, then I'd give it. So that was the start, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to see you, and it's good to see. I think the conversation we had, especially in London, we were talking about some of the changes you've seen over the years. I mean, it's good that now you're looping, aren't you? You're one of the looping gang.
Yeah.
But in the early days, looping must have seemed a million miles away compared to where you were then. I mean, did you say it was 1954?
1954, yeah. And back then, I can remember it was during the summer of 54. It was quite a hot summer, and I was forever at the kitchen tap drinking water, gallons and gallons and gallons of water. And then my mother noticed, because she obviously went to the loo and cleaned it up and everything on a regular basis. She noticed that on occasions when I missed the loo and I'd peed on the floor as a 5-year-old, she noticed that it was leaving white deposits, which were quite sticky.
Oh.
So she whisked me off to the GP, Dr. Elwell, and in those days you just sat in the surgery and took your turn for the people in front of you to go, and then eventually you went in, and she took me in, and he said, right, I think you probably did a cleaner test, I would have thought, at that time. But he said, straight to the hospital with you, my lad. And she took me there, and all I can really remember on that first day he's being told by the nurse, let's go up on the ward and see the fish tank with all the fish. And that was the ruse they used to get me up on the ward. And once I was up there, Mum disappeared. I burst out crying, and I was there a month.
Month.
Oh, they stabilised me. Yeah, yeah. And I can remember the nurse would come round with scales, and they would weigh out all the carbs, like the potatoes and that sort of thing. And when I eventually got home, Mum had to use a diet which was called the line ration diet. So this line ration diet is actually in the book she used, which is this one, which is the Diabetic ABC by R.D. Lawrence. And this is it's not my original one, but it's an original one from 1955. So that's the one my mum would have used. And this particular line diet, you had so many portions of carbs which were black and proteins and fats which are red. The carbs were worth 10 each, the protein was 7.5 and the fat was 9. And depending on the particular lines, I can actually show you an idea of this. Right, so this is, I don't know if you can see it, but you've got red and you've got black.
Yes, yes. Okay.
One black portion added to one red portion was one line ration. So that's how it did it. And because you had so many different ones, you can mix and match. So, but eventually my mum, I don't know how long, but eventually she got used to doing it by eye, a bit like we do now with carb counting. And she did away with weighing everything out.
So I guess because you were so young, you were 5 years old at the time, your mum kind of took charge of your diabetes at that stage.
She took charge of me, and for years she actually did the injections because I wouldn't do it. I was really scared. I tried the thing, you know, you do with oranges and things like that, and nothing would get over my fear of doing it. My mum, she would just do it for me, which was brilliant of her. But they did buy me a device to help me, which was called a Palmer injection gun. And I've actually got one. And sorry about that, I'm going to have to decline a phone call. Yeah, she actually brought me a Palmer injection gun with the idea that this gun would make it more fun for me to be able to inject. You used to cock it like that, and then
wow.
that flew off, and that syringe flew off. That's what happened the first time I tried that on my leg after practicing on oranges. It actually, the needle shot in my leg with the syringe after jumping off the carriage like that did then, and I was left with it hanging down my leg.
Oh. Ouch.
So that put the heebie-jeebies up me, and that was the last time I used it.
I can imagine. And I suppose then in the earlier days, the needles would have been bigger, less developed, maybe a little bit blunter. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. The needles were quite thick and quite long. They were sort of 3/4 of an inch to an inch long. They were 27 to 29 gauge, which is a lot thicker than the ones that we had. I did have an even thicker needle, which I can remember. And a lot of these programs you see on my telly, and they go marching up to a patient with a needle. It looked a bit like those, where they're absolutely huge. And what it wasn't meant for going in your skin. It's meant for putting through the rubber cap on the vial of insulin.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that must have been so painful, especially as a child, and you're just coming to terms with it all.
Yeah, it's not like today where you have, you know, four mil and they're very fine gauge. But we had a little piece of metal, very fine, which you used to have to clean out the needle with it to remove any debris, probably bits of skin and goodness knows what else.
So the needles then, was that a case of having to? Did people boil? Did you boil your needles, or did you get new ones?
Well, you used to boil the needles and the syringe. Later on, we started to use cases like this, metal cases to put them in. But otherwise, it was just boiled. Later on, we had cases like that, and you could keep them in a methylated spirit, which at that time we could get from the chemist quite easily. Nowadays, it's harder to get.
Yeah.
But
did you? There must have been a stage between that where you moved to more disposable items, needles. Was that kind of maybe the 80s? Was it the 1980s when that happened?
Yeah, I think it was even before that. I'm not sure, to be honest. It sort of clouded in, you know, in the distance, as it were.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had syringes. Some of them had needles fixed on them, which were part of them, and other ones you could use different needles on them. That was much better. But you know, the glass syringes, once the case came where you could actually put them in the spirit, it was easier to carry around, you know, with you. And then of course, when the plastic syringes came, you could just carry those even easier.
Yeah.
And then of course the pens, like the Novo pen, that was absolutely wonderful when they came out.
Yeah, that was kind of how my childhood into adulthood developed. As I became an adult, the pens came out, so that was a big change for me as well. So it must have.
Yeah, they were quite they were quite an innovation at the time. Sheila Rees, a doctor, I think she was from Glasgow, or it may have been Aberdeen, and she in '78 had the idea of designing an instant pen for her daughter, who was on injections, and she started that. So so by the time I started using it, was probably in the '80s. You know, before that, it would have been the '70s, and that would have been the plastic syringes.
Yeah. So that was the early days and the middle sort of days of your diabetes.
Yeah.
As we moved into the '90s and the turn of the millennium, was that when you started to use an insulin pump, or was it a bit later than that?
No, I mean, I started using insulin pumps in 2016.
So quite new. Okay.
Yeah. Obviously they've been going, but in my sphere of diabetes, I didn't know about it really until 2015. And then 2016, I was offered it by my DSN.
So just between the early days of those large injections, the huge gauge needles you were using in the 50s and the 60s up until today, that must be a huge shift in how you feel about your management of the condition.
I mean, you know, the other big thing was when the Novo pen came out, or the equivalent of, that was sort of the time when we changed from injecting once a day or twice a day, as I was at that time, to injecting before meals. So, you know, multi-dose injections.
You went on to the MPI based on the bolus.
Yeah. So that was a great change, where you could literally go out and just take your kit with you, and I looked upon it as though, you know, if I was hungry, I wanted another meal or wanted a snack, I'd just inject for it.
Yeah.
Whereas on the long-acting insulin, the one where I was on Lente, I think it was Lente, at the beginning, and that injection lasted all day. So you have to eat at certain times, and that's all I remember being at school and at work after that in the early days, where you would say inject at 7 in the morning, and you'd have to eat by say 12:30, 1 o'clock. You'd have to snack in the morning, say a biscuit, also in the afternoon, also at bedtime.
Yeah.
So as far as I was concerned, the diabetes was controlling me. When insulin pens came out, we went to the MDI. That changed the way I thought about things. I thought, right, I'm ruling this now. You know, which is what I did.
Yeah.
And with pumps, it's even better.
Yeah. I was that kind of happened to me at school. I was on 2 injections a day, and you were feeding the insulin, weren't you, that you had more than taking insulin for the food in your life.
Yeah.
Whereas
with the when the pens came out, I mean, I had 2 pens. I've still got them because I use just in case the pump goes wrong. But that enabled you to control it and just inject for what you're eating, you know.
Yeah.
I've never been on an official course like Daphne or anything like that. I was from when the Novo pen came out. I taught myself carb counting.
Yeah. Same. I think a lot of us did the same thing. I mean, I think Daphne's quite important for many people, and it's useful. But I think for people like you and I, with a few years on the clock, we sort of muddled our way and found our way of carb counting over the years. How about your technology in terms of blood glucose? So in the early days, there would have been no technology at all. What was the early days like to monitor your blood?
Well, I used a Clinitest urine testing kit, which was made by Ames, and used that probably up until the 80s when Diasticks came out, and the equivalent for doing ketones, the keto sticks. But the tablets were highly sensitive to moisture from air and water, and you had to be careful because any moisture could cause a chemical reaction and the bottle could in fact explode. It was worrying, but I never found that at all. But basically it was a pocket-sized chemistry set. So you did your 5 drops of urine and 10 drops of water. You pop the tablet in, it boiled up, created a big fizz, and then you compared it against a colour chart.
Wow.
I haven't got one of those. I did have it, but I gave it to hospital years ago as a collector's piece. Wish I'd kept it. I've been trying to get one for the last couple of years. But I did manage to get a urine testing kit that's even older than the Clinitest one, which came out in, I think, '54. And this is one made by Eli Lilly and Co. in America. This one is actually manufactured or sold in the UK. It's got everything in it. And this is quite different. It's quite different from it uses the same chemicals, which is these here as the Clinitest did, which basically is copper sulfate compound. And you put your urine in there, and then you put one of these crystals in a little burner underneath, and you literally lit it, and it had a timed burn, and that would give you different colours on a colour chart, similar to Clinitest, but slightly different colours.
Wow.
And that would give you your reading.
Yeah, like the Dulux colour chart.
well, a bit like that, I suppose. But as I say, I never used that. I know one of the people I know, Pete Davis, he actually used the old copper sulfate with a methylated spirits burner. So it did a similar thing to this. But this was just something so you didn't have to have a Bunsen burner with you or a little burner. But I was pleased to get that. But I'd like to get the kidney test one, which is a little grey plastic container, which had a test tube, a dropper, and space for the tablet. So if anyone's got one, I'd like it, please.
So that's the early stages of your blood glucose technology, for want of a better term. It's not particularly technological in terms of today's pieces of kit that we use. So you must have seen some advances over the decades.
Yeah, as far as I can remember, the first meter I ever had was a Reflolux S. It might have been the 2. I think it was the S. And from there, of course, meters have just improved. I mean, before that, you'd do the urine test, and then after the urine test, they started doing, the BM sticks that the hospital used. I worked for a time at the hospital, so I obtained them through there for a while. But I ended up using dia sticks, and then moved on to the meters and used their sort of proprietary sticks. And then the meters improved because, they had ones come out where you could do ketones as well as, which up to then you had to, use a strip that you peed on, which only told you what you were like hours ago and not what your ketones were like now. With the Clinitest test strips in the old days, 0% sugar, the blue, was in actual fact anywhere between 0 and 9.5 millimoles, which we use today. So if you had 2%, it was way over. And to be honest, mine at the time when I was younger was nearly always 1 to 2%. So my readings were actually sky high most of the time. So I was surprised that I haven't got complications, except for a bit of retinopathy. And I'm surprised, I'm still here basically. But coming back to meters and the test strips, the next improvement with those was the fact that they had built-in calculators for inputting your carbs and telling you what bolus was recommended. And then that technology eventually came to be part of pumps and pumping through the looping, that sort of thing. So
there's quite a lot of steps, I suppose, over the years that you've combined, and now you're as technologically advanced as anybody, I suppose, when it comes to insulin and blood glucose, because you're part of the looping gang now, aren't you?
Yeah, the we are not hashtag we are not waiting. As I said, I started looping in 2016, so late compared with some people. But I was on a Medtronic 640G, which I found okay. But I'd started, I suppose, about 2 years in when Freestyle Libre came out. I eventually got one of those in, I think it was 2018. I know it was a year after they announced it in Daily Mail. I was on holiday abroad and read it in the paper. and came back and tried to get one. It took me a year.
Yeah, in the early days, it was quite difficult to
Yeah.
get one, wasn't it?
And that made me start searching on social media and finding out more, and which brought me on to the fact that you could actually loop with pumps. And eventually in 2020, after I'd researched things, I found out that if I went for a Dana RS pump, and I brought a device called a Meow Meow from China, which I think was about £120, you could fit that over the top of a Libre, and that would convert it into a CGM. And then you could tie all these other bits up, such as Android APS and Xtrip, and it just worked magic.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't loop myself, but what I've seen and just listening to you speak about it as well, it does seem like, wow, it's such advanced technology, and it's so clever, and it takes away a lot of the burden. I guess if you were to compare today as a looper, somebody who loops, to a person with type 1 diabetes in the mid to late 1950s, that must be a world away. That must be like living on another planet, is it?
It is. It's just amazing now. But the thing I think about, and especially after attending the conference in Barcelona, be it virtually, as a DDoT voice, it brought home how other countries, around the world, not just a few, just can't get this tech. So they are basically where I was back in the day, just using test strips if they can get them.
Yeah, that's a big issue. I mean, this
The
blog
insulin
and
as
my
well.
blog supports Action for Diabetes. I'm going to put a link down below, and they help people in South Asia who just cannot get the basics.
Yeah,
we're quite lucky, you and I, in terms of the technology we can access via the NHS.
that's right. I just think it's amazing that in the time we live in, that other countries just can't get it, and countries that can get it, like America, charge such high prices that they just can't afford it, and people are actually dying because they can't afford to buy the basic insulin, and it's disgusting. It really is.
It
And
is.
to think that Banting, who actually was part of the team that Banting and Best and Collick, who actually managed to isolate insulin and inject it eventually. He sold the patent for that for $1 because he believed that everybody should have access to it. And I think it was Liddy that brought the patent for $1. Look at them now.
Yeah.
Look at the profits.
Yeah, multi-billion-dollar companies now, aren't they, on the back of all of that stuff?
Yeah. So that to me is terrible, and it needs sorting, as quickly as possible. And talking to some of the people with a DDoT voice and from various parts of the world, Indonesia and Brazil and South Africa and places like that, they need help with getting tech, and they need help getting basics.
Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. Maybe, perhaps that'll be the next advancement. I mean, in the UK, at least, we've been talking about cures lately, thanks to the donation to Diabetes UK and
JDRF.
Yeah, there was a mutual £50 million donation. So that's pushed the subject of cures a little bit more. But I think perhaps hopefully that will happen at some stage. But maybe we can work on access to the basics that people just cannot get all over the world at the moment.
Hopefully. I mean, they've been talking about a cure ever since I was first diagnosed in '54. There's always, oh, the cure's 5 years away, 10 years away. That amount of money is good, but how far would it go? You know, is it enough? Hopefully there will be. I mean, at the ATTD conference in Barcelona, they were talking about a pump which is implanted into the abdomen cavity, and you would swallow an insulin pill that would dock magnetically to the pump. It would put a needle through into the capsule to take the insulin out, and then it would travel through and be ejected in the most natural way, of course. And the reservoir would be filled up that way. You'd have an implantable sensor that would last for a long, long time. And it's all controlled by a hand device like a mobile phone right now.
Yeah.
So that's not a cure, but that's one of the things that they were talking about in how they're looking at things.
Yeah, it's not a cure. It's certainly a big advancement, isn't it? I think cures will be, could be arguably just biologically. I mean, if we'd have to somehow make
I always thought, ever since I was a teenager, that there might be an implantable pump, or they might be able to, you know, transplant the islets, the beta cells, which they're trying. But the trouble is, you know, you need to take tablets to stop it being rejected. But there is research being developed, I believe, in France, where they're trying to coat the islets with particular substance that's thin enough to let the insulin through, but not let the antibodies go through that would attack it.
Oh,
so if that came about, that would be quite good, because it would be using, I'm assuming that they would take your cells and grow the islets, so it would be from your body in effect anyway.
Yeah.
There's lots of things like that, but an actual cure, I don't think they'll ever get a cure for somebody like me, who's long-term had it all the time. But I think they might have some sort of cure, like maybe a vaccine, so that they can give it to children like they do for mumps and measles and things.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same as you. I think perhaps for you and I, it might not happen, but maybe for the youngsters or people that aren't even here yet, it'll stop it happening for them. So I think we've covered a lot there, Martin. What I'm going to do is, at the bottom of this video on YouTube, I'm going to put a link to your blog when you published one, because I know you've got that on the way. I'm also going to put a link to your Twitter handle, so if people want to talk to you on social media, they can come and pester you with tweets.
They can do. They can message me.
Yeah, and I also know you've got a WhatsApp discussion at the moment with a few looping people.
Yeah,
if they want to join in that, they can contact you there. Yeah,
I set that up with Kate Garrett. We both met last year at a local Sutton and Carshall and Diabetes UK association. I actually met her for the first time there, but she'd emailed me when was it now? Couple of years back, because she was thinking of going on a pump, and she'd asked the DSN if anyone could explain her a bit that was doing it. So my DSN sent me a message saying, are you looping, Martin? I suspect you are. Could you talk to somebody? So I emailed her back and came clean, because I hadn't told my DSN or my consultant that I was looping. And I emailed her back and said, yeah, I'll come clean. I've been doing it. I said, you know me, you know I love tech. And we, Kate and I got in contact through that. and then we eventually met up. And we're on another WhatsApp group, What's Happening Loopers. And from that, we got the idea of maybe setting one up for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's Southwest London Peer Support Group for pumpers and loopers. And although it's called Southwest London, we have got people from Northern Ireland and various parts of the UK. So if anyone wants help looping or pumping, they can send us a message, and then we will send a link. If we don't know the answer, we'll find somebody that does.
Wonderful. That's excellent. Thank you so much, Martin. And thank you for your time today. I know we've been chatting for quite a while, actually, haven't we, today?
A pleasure.
But I think we've covered a lot, and I hope people have enjoyed the video. If you have, please tick the like button down below. You can click a notification bell and sub to the channel and all that good stuff, and then you won't miss anything in the future. But for the time being, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you.